Okay, at this time we'll be opening the floor to various questions from the audience for Dr. Miles Groth. So I believe there is a microphone just right there. If we could form a line of interested members of the audience to ask questions. I just want to go over some of the ground rules, though, of the Q&A session we're going to have. So we're going to limit questions to 45 seconds each. That does force you to be brief. Also, 3 questions will be asked in succession, during which time both of us will be taking notes, and he will answer those 3 questions after each of them have been posited. So. Yes. Does anybody know if that's...
Maybe I'll just ask the question without the microphone. First of all, thank you very much for talking to us today. My question is, I was wondering if you could give us more detail about why it is that fewer men are attending colleges and universities. Is it because they are going to other places, or is it because there are now more women attending, so that the proportion in population is now different?
In absolute numbers, there are just more people going to college. Oh, okay, right.
If that's the end of your question, we'll have the next.
That's the end of my question. I'm done.
Thank you.
Hi. I don't know if everyone can hear me. I think you can all hear me without the mic.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I actually have a couple of questions, so I'm going to try to...
We do need to limit it to 1. You can return if you like, but...
okay, so I'll ask one question then.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I know that the men's movement in general is diverse. There's different people believe different things. But from your individual perspective, do you consider yourself some type of feminist or some type of anti-feminist? I'm just wondering if there's a bridge between, your personal beliefs and feminism. And I want to quote something in particular that you said that interested me. You mentioned, for example, men are expected to go into things like football, which are dangerous sports. I'm just curious because I've heard feminists making the same point many times before about how football and many other traditional male sports are dangerous. And when we've made that point, I'm using we because I consider myself a feminist. When we've made that point, we've been called misandrists. So I'm just wondering, is there a balance? Just wondering. Yeah.
Thank you.
How you doing, Dr. Groth? Dan Parents, Voice of Men News, Ontario. I'd like to ask you, well, first I'd like to say I realize the importance of men's groups being formed on university and college campuses. But in Ontario, they are now teaching gender studies in high schools. And do you think that there should be a male version to complement in the high schools of Ontario? Sorry.
Thank you.
Relying on Dylan's memory. So, the first question I think we got, the fellow who asked, the proportion is absolute. It doesn't have to do with the overall greater numbers of people attending college. Sure, there are many more people attending college, but my point has to do with the representation of men on campus, which has declined even while the numbers of people going, and that means men and women going, have been rising. Am I a feminist or an anti-feminist? No, I'm neither. And I don't consider myself to be a masculinist. There is such a word. I think of myself as a humanist. The background of my own education was in philosophy, and then moved on into psychotherapy, and finally into psychology, particularly now the last 10 years, psychology of boys and men. And I think perhaps those words have lost some of their precision of meaning is lost. To ask that question becomes almost meaningless because there are so many possible ways of reading the meaning of that word. So I would call myself a humanist and see myself interested in the opportunity of everybody to take advantage of the university experience and not be underrepresented, as was the case before 1960 for women, and not to be underrepresented, as is the case now for men. Oh, and then the question came about a curriculum at the high school in was it Ontario? No, I'm sorry, in
Ontario, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And well, if you're talking about junior high school or senior high school, both, what grade?
I believe that they're starting to offer it at around grade 11
Grade 11. Okay, well, they sort of know
right
what
now, but I
that is.
believe that they may bring it down to grade 9.
Right. I'm not sure that a lot of my graduating seniors at Wagner know what gender is at this point. And for a couple of reasons. So I'm really doubtful that it would make much sense to talk to 15 or 16-year-olds about gender. We've tended to what I would say call infantilize kids to such an extent that even by that age they haven't begun to take themselves very seriously. By contrast, my father's generation, you took yourself seriously as a man or a woman when you were 15 or 16. So it surprises me that the people who would bring that curriculum into the school system would expect their students to really know what they're talking about. Sex education is something else, right? To know about the parts and pieces, that certainly makes sense, and that's been in place for a long time. But I'd really be interested to read the curriculum before passing on it. My only question is whether kids in our culture at that age really know what that word means and what that could possibly mean.
You can find more information on the Miss G website, and it's quite an interesting read.
I will do that.
There are some.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
We can have the next question at this time.
Yeah, so sometimes I find myself arguing with my profs about my marks, right? Do you ever think that some faculty will undergrade undesirable students to weed them out?
Okay, thank you. And next question in succession.
No, it was just that question.
Okay, the next, yes, next participant. Thank you.
Next question, me. Hi, my name is Gene Esme. I have a question for Professor Groth. I'm pleased to see a growing awareness that there really are legitimate men's issues and that they are being discussed on college campuses where the purpose of a liberal education is to discuss exactly these issues. One of the things that I, as a father, am finding particularly disturbing, however, is a group of what I would call truly hateful and bigoted so-called men's advocates like Michael Kimmel and Hugo Schweitzer, who teach vicious, hateful, bigoted lies like men perpetuate a rape culture of women and need to be taught to stop dominating and oppressing women. I find these toxic and hateful and want them kept as far away from my children's education as I can. Yet they're opening a school of so-called men's studies that are teaching young men to hate themselves. And how do we address this? That's all my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Orla, and my question has to do with the nomenclature, actually. In my lifetime, when I went to university, there were women's centers, and they have all, in Canada, seem to be renamed women in trans centers. And also in my lifetime, there used to be women's studies, but now it's women in gender studies. So I'm just curious why the name men's centers is not saying men in trans centers, and has there been discussion about that?
campuses grade certain students more harshly and undeservingly in order to get rid of them. And I'm guessing you're thinking this might happen by gender. I don't really think that that happens. I don't see it happening on my campus. I think in general, most of the faculty that I know are rational enough to grade a student on the basis of merit. So if the question was leading to, could this be one of the reasons why there are fewer guys continuing and graduating because they get graded so poorly that they have to leave, they drop out? I don't think that that's a factor. So this was a question about Michael Kimmel, and I mentioned him twice in this little talk. Professor Kimmel and I have participated online discussions a couple of times. I met him a few times. He came to Wagner College a few years ago at somebody else's invitation in the psychology department. I believe from what I've read of his books and what I've heard in his talks, and I've heard 6 or 7 of his talks, that he represents a creature that I don't know, that I've never seen. I'm thinking particularly about his book Guyland, The Perilous World, in which I don't remember the name of the title, the rest of the name of the title. I do not see college-age men living in a perilous world. I see them in a world, as I described, where they are stunned to find that perhaps they are not welcome. How did he get to that position? You'd have to ask him. I am concerned, however, about one thing, and for the record, I may take a minute or so to say this. He has announced recently at Stony Brook that he will open the first program of studies at the graduate level leading to a degree in men's studies, as he calls it, beginning in 2017. But in fact, as I mentioned in my talk, the first of those programs will in fact begin in 2014 and will be at the University of South Australia with an international faculty. So he's been a little naughty and not telling the truth of what he knows there to be the case. And perhaps he's just a very good entrepreneur, academic entrepreneur for those things. As for his ideas, I suggest that you read his books and come to your own conclusions about his view of male development, sociology, masculinity, and the like. Do views like his belong in the universities? Of course. They belong there. But other views about men and boys must also be there. And that will not be the case at Stony Brook when this center opens, given the faculty and his own particular ideological investment. So I would fault him only in not being sure that students who are in that course would have the widest possible range of exposure to views, and not only his, which represent a certain take on things. I could argue some of the details of that, but I'd rather you read the books.
Before we get to the subsequent question, just with a show of hands, how many more people are interested in asking questions? I only ask that because we're working under a fairly tight schedule right now. We have to officially end at 9 o'clock. It looks like by university time it's 3 minutes to 9. I think we have considerably more time than that. So how many of you were interested in asking questions? Okay. okay.
Yeah, on the trans and issue, that's a highly specialized area within gender studies, as I understand it. And I'm sure that any comprehensive women's studies / gender studies or any male studies / men's studies program should in fact consider that. I do a course at Wagner called Other Sexualities, which takes up a whole variety of sexual and gender expression. My interest is only in comprehensiveness and all voices being heard and all views being expressed. That's what we have to give students. We don't want to give them. We're not there to propagandize. We're not there to inculcate dogmas. We're there to teach people how to think, and that means bringing to them the full range of ideas on a given topic, no matter how incompatible they are, and no matter how they might annoy any one particular person. If we've done that, we've done the right job on campus. They then make up their minds using their own judgment, which we hope we've also helped improve since the first day of their life. Okay, so we're going to have 3 more questions in the bunch, and then we have to move out because of the regulation of the space.
So we'll take the first of the last questions.
Good evening. My name is Attila Vincer. I am the Secretary of the Canadian Maltese Charitable Service Trust, a senior executive at Canada Court Watch. I've recently decided to write for A Voice for Men, and I've had discussions with Justin Trottier with respect to assisting them in raising funds for the center that they're working on. I have been advocating for the rights of children and families. I've been advocating for the rights of children and families, which includes everybody, with focus on children for the past 8 years. Prior to that, I was a businessman, and I was oblivious to any of these problems that we're seeing these days. As it turns out, I have seen children from as early as kindergarten, where I've assisted to teach in classrooms, where they're having difficulty with the problems of divorce. So the issue of children being distressed begins at an early age. Where I'm heading with this is an area that I've noticed as to being the biggest problem, and I think we need to address it ahead of the university level, is the issue of suicide. In Canada, 8 men and 2 women, just a little less than 2 women a day, will commit suicide every single day. To put that into perspective, that's the same amount of people that have died at 9/11 every single year. That's 30,000 men that have died in that period of time, and 3,000 women. I would like to stress the importance, and my question would be, what can we do to ensure that we as educators, as mentors, bring it to public light that this condition exists, a condition that is very, very difficult for me, as I know dozens of people who have committed suicide, including Earl Silverman, who I spoke with just 2 weeks before he took his life, and he did not seem as if he was going to do such a thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi again. Thank you for the talk and for answering my previous question. My next question, I guess, is there does seem to be an underrepresentation of men in universities. I'm not as familiar with the situation in the U.S., which is where you live, but here in Ontario, at least, it seems that there's a percentage of men, and I say men specifically because it's mostly men, who go into trades, things like becoming a plumber, electrician, many more. These are, fields where women are underrepresented. So I'm wondering, do you think part of the reason why men are underrepresented in universities is because some of them go to trades, into the trades, or do you think it's specifically because of the cultural misandry that you mentioned? Thank you.
Thank you.
So my name's Adam. regards to the trans issue, one of the things you've mentioned is that a men's center would really complement a women's center. So do you not think being trans inclusive would really support a women's center? For instance, if you've got trans men, talk about them still needing a cervix scan, because even though they're a trans man, they still have a cervix, just like a women's center would have to talk about trans women still needing to get prostate scans. And at the same time, do you not think it would be stigmatizing for a trans man trying to access a women and trans center going in the body of a man, which is what they feel they should be identifying as, but they're going into a women's center and feeling they have to identify their trans identity, which they may not actually want to be ultimate there. So do you not think that could be a good crossover between the two centers?
I do. Now you can pronounce us man and wife. And yeah, the trades have remained pretty much at the same level, and so I would say that the numbers of men who are at college, at university, they're decreased, is not because they're going there. In fact, the numbers of blue-collar jobs, as I understand, the trades, so-called, are diminishing. Right? More of this kind of work can be done by machines than ever before. So it leaves us again with this extra number, this surplus of men who seem to have nowhere to go. So I don't see that as a factor here. And going from 3 to 2 to 1, the most important thing to happen is to have fathers like you. I met them. I met before this all started, and I think that this kind of man, this kind of father, and I met. If you didn't hear me just say that. My father's here as well. I met. Okay. And I met his son. I think we underestimate the importance of fathers in the lives of children, boys and girls, but most particularly in the lives of boys. And given the fact of divorce, the high divorce rate, and the likelihood that a son or sons and daughters will be given to a mother, that means that in 2 out of 3 cases, that means that these boys and girls, and for very different reasons, these children will suffer from the absence of the influence of the father. The father is, I think, perhaps a major cultural figure that we have lost sight of in this whole discussion too. I'd like to end on a really jazzy note, but I can't think of one. Just would like to thank Justin and Cafe for inviting me here, and I would invite anybody who had a question to send me an email, and I'll be happy to respond to it.
As well, everyone here is invited to the fundraising reception across the street at College at O'Grady's Tap and Grill. So I hope to see you there. Thank you very much to everyone.